It happened under a moonless sky. At exactly 02:13 a.m., the silence of the Sahel was shattered by the thunder of rotor blades and the quiet sprint of shadows. Burkina Faso's special forces, ghosting across the desert, armed with suppressed rifles, night vision, and a single mission: eliminate the threat. No survivors, no leaks. Their target was a compound tucked away in the northern borderlands. From the outside, it looked abandoned: crumbling walls, dry wells, scattered debris. But the intelligence was clear. Inside was a foreign-backed mercenary base, receiving steady arms shipments and encrypted orders from Ivory Coast. Weeks of surveillance had confirmed it. Thermal imaging showed rotating patrols, satellite scans identified a weapons cache, and an intercepted drone feed revealed crates marked Delta 8, non-state operators, Abidjan. Traoré didn't hesitate. If they come for us in silence, we answer in thunder. At go time, the Burkinabe commandos moved in. 3 squads, codenamed Shadow Wolf, Ember 1, and Coup Ghost, breached the perimeter simultaneously. No alarms, no mercy. Inside, chaos erupted. Gunfire cut through the compound. Explosions tore through makeshift barracks and fuel drums. A mercenary commander tried to flee in a jeep. He didn't make it 200 meters. The entire operation lasted 16 minutes. When the dust settled, 32 foreign mercenaries lay dead. 4 were captured alive. And one, a senior operative, was found clutching a satellite phone still connected to a number registered in Ivory Coast's Ministry of Defense. The base was destroyed, but the real victory came after the flames, inside a bunker beneath the site. There, hidden in a steel briefcase, were maps, payment records, satellite images, and names. Names of Ivorian officials, names of foreign consultants, and at the very top, an operation code name, Project Black Horizon. Traoré's intelligence chief handed him the file personally. It's worse than we thought. This wasn't just an attack, it was a plan to remove you. The war, it seemed, had already begun, and now the world would know. The metal case was old, scorched on one side, dented by shrapnel, locked with a biometric seal, but it held the future of a nation. Inside, Burkina Faso's top military cryptographers found what no one was supposed to see: evidence of betrayal, of collusion, of a plot born in secret corridors and funded in foreign currency. Dozens of files were recovered: physical papers, USB drives, and one sleek satellite phone with an encrypted contact list. And at the top of that list, a direct link to Abidjan. Messages revealed a chilling sequence of instructions: destabilize the northern corridor, eliminate Traoré before the AES summit, secure uranium zones after regime collapse. Attached to the messages were payment logs showing $4.6 million in wire transfers routed through offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Dubai, flagged with aliases used by Ivorian defense operatives. Worse still, a detailed map, not of Burkina Faso's terrain, but of Traoré's personal movements. It included his flight schedules, known safe houses, AES command posts, even his mother's rural home, marked in red ink with the word leverage. This wasn't random violence. This was an assassination plot, surgically planned, with the clear goal of regime change. Traoré's inner circle stared at the evidence in disbelief. Their worst fear was now reality. Someone in Ivory Coast was trying to finish what France could not. They cross-referenced the phone data with known Ivorian intelligence signatures. 3 names matched. One of them was a senior official in Ouattara's National Security Council. That night, AES military intelligence compiled the file under a codename of their own: Operation Couper la main, cut the hand. And at its center, they placed a photograph. Grainy, satellite captured. It showed a private jet parked on a secluded airstrip near Abidjan, and next to it, a foreign man unloading crates of weapons. The caption read, "Unidentified mercenary asset linked to Western contractor." The evidence was explosive, and it was only the beginning. They thought they were invisible, operating in shadows, untraceable, untouchable, but they didn't count on one thing. Burkina Faso had been watching. For months, Captain Traoré's counterintelligence units had been quietly tracking strange patterns across the region. Vehicles with no plates, encrypted communications using outdated French military codes, unexplained drone sightings over key AES sites. Now, with the evidence in hand, it all made sense. The traitors weren't only outside the borders, some were inside. Data recovered from the destroyed mercenary base confirmed it. A clandestine network of informants had been operating across Ouagadougou, Bobo-Dioulasso, and border towns near Côte d'Ivoire. At the top of the network, a figure known only by the code name Le Chacal. Le Chacal was a veteran of West African covert ops, once trained in Paris, later expelled from Burkina Faso under Roch Kaboré's presidency. Now he had returned, not as a spy, but as a coordinator of chaos. The network's structure was simple, ruthless. Tier 1, Ivorian intelligence handlers, operating from Abidjan. Tier 2, local mercenary recruiters in Burkina Faso, using aid NGOs as cover. Tier 3, paid informants, market vendors, couriers, and even one junior officer in the Burkinabe Air Force. The plan was terrifyingly precise. Destabilize the borders, coordinate urban unrest, paralyze infrastructure, then assassinate Traoré during a scheduled speech in Kaya. It was a coup, slow, silent, deadly. But there was one flaw. The network didn't know it had already been breached. Traoré had placed double agents inside Tier 2. They fed false intel, delayed operations, and, at the perfect moment, flipped the switch. Now the files were in AES hands, names, photos, locations, traitors marked for exposure or elimination. In a secure bunker, Traoré looked at a wall-sized screen filled with the names of the network's core members. He tapped 3 of them, looked at his commanders and said, "Bring them in alive. The world is going to hear what they were paid to do." Because this wasn't just about Burkina Faso anymore. It was about proving to the entire continent that Africa's enemies now wore familiar faces, and they were being paid to kill African dreams. For the first time in weeks, the president vanished. No speeches, no motorcades, no public movements. The streets of Ouagadougou buzzed with unease. Traoré had gone completely silent. And in a nation under siege, silence was not peace. It was calm before a storm. Rumors exploded. Had he fled the country? Had there been an internal coup? Was he already dead? Even Western news outlets began to speculate. But inside the AES command bunker, deep below the capital, Traoré was not hiding. He was preparing. Surrounded by encrypted feeds and military intelligence, he studied the enemy's footprint. For 48 hours, he reviewed every intercepted file, voice recording, and surveillance video from the mercenary base. He traced payments, mapped satellite drone paths, and confirmed what he needed to know. Ivory Coast was not just complicit, they were coordinating. At 03:01 on the 3rd day, Traoré summoned his inner circle, a circle of 5. The intelligence chief, the head of the special forces, the digital warfare strategist, the minister of defense, and his most trusted field commander, Captain Samba Kaboré. Traoré's eyes were bloodshot, his voice was low, measured, dangerous. They want to see what happens when a soldier kneels. Instead, they're going to see what happens when a lion turns toward the hunter. The room went cold. We hit back, not just with bullets, but with truth. Orders were issued, files were prepared, prisoners were transported, and the AES communication network was reprogrammed to broadcast globally. At dawn, the silence shattered. Across every Burkinabe screen, Traoré reappeared, standing tall, in uniform, surrounded by national flags and grim-faced officers. His first words were not for his people. They were for Ivory Coast, for France, for the world. "We know what you did, and now, so will everyone else." He held up a tablet, a tap, and suddenly, footage played. A captured mercenary, handcuffed, face visible, confessing to the plan, and naming names. The message was clear. This was never just an attack on me. This was an attack on the right of African nations to choose their own destiny. We will not let it go unanswered. And with that, Traoré struck. Not with rage, not with vengeance, but with precision, truth, and fury wrapped in discipline. The world watched in stunned silence. The video was everywhere, from WhatsApp groups in Bamako to newsrooms in Paris. A mercenary commander, bloodied but alive, confessing to being paid by Ivorian intelligence officials to help remove Captain Ibrahim Traoré before the end of the quarter. Names were spoken, dates were confirmed, payments were traced, and yet, within 2 hours, the Ivorian presidency issued a blunt, panicked statement. Burkina Faso's claims are false, fabricated, and dangerous. The Republic of Côte d'Ivoire denies any involvement in destabilization activities. The Western media echoed it almost instantly. CNN, France 24, and Reuters called Traoré's revelations unverified, possibly doctored, and politically motivated. But the African public wasn't buying it. Within hours, hashtags erupted across the continent. Ivory conspiracy. Traoré was targeted. No more puppets. Inside Ouattara's palace in Abidjan, panic was real. Internal leaks revealed that the military command was split. Some generals urged quiet cooperation with Burkina Faso to de-escalate. Others demanded an aggressive posture, troop mobilizations, counter-accusations, and media spin. But then came the leak that changed everything. A voice recording, shaky but clear, surfaced from within the Ivorian intelligence community. A man's voice, calm, calculated. If Traoré survives till the summit, we lose Niger, we lose Mali, we lose the zone. Remove him, or we'll be the next domino. The voice was quickly identified. Colonel Vincent Gabahi, Deputy Director of Ivory Coast's Internal Security Bureau. It was no longer just suspicion, it was proof. Even allies of Ouattara began to go silent, and on the streets of Abidjan, whispers began to spread. Are we being used to fight France's war again? Meanwhile, Traoré made no further public statements. He didn't need to. He had turned the truth into a weapon. And now, all of West Africa was listening, because when lies collapse under the weight of evidence, denial becomes the loudest admission. The betrayal had been exposed, but instead of collapsing under pressure, Burkina Faso stood taller and was no longer standing alone. Just 24 hours after Traoré's broadcast, Mali's interim president, Assimi Goïta, issued a live statement. "We will not let our brother stand isolated. An attack on Traoré is an attack on the Alliance des États du Sahel." The message was echoed within minutes by Niger's General Chiani, who didn't mince words. Ivory Coast has crossed a red line. If they move against Burkina Faso again, they will face all of us. That evening, an emergency AES summit was called. For the first time, the military leadership of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso convened inside a reinforced underground command facility near Dori, close to the tri-border zone. They arrived in silence. They left with a pact. It was signed in blood-red ink on thick paper, beneath flags that no longer bowed to France or the West. No member of AES shall face destabilization alone. A threat to one is a call to arms for all. They called it the Dori Doctrine. To the outside world, it looked like a defensive alliance. But inside AES command channels, everyone knew what it really meant. They were preparing for war. AES intelligence units began joint patrols. Cyber teams were merged. Shared airspace surveillance began that same night. And for the first time in modern African history, an autonomous continental strike unit was formed, comprised of elite commandos from the 3 AES nations, trained together, deployed together, and loyal to no outside power. At the AES bank headquarters in Ouagadougou, financial analysts began rerouting emergency reserves to fund regional defense logistics. This wasn't just military, this was total continental mobilization. In Conakry, Guinea pledged logistical support. In N'Djamena, Chad offered intelligence channels. And quietly, behind the scenes, Russian and Iranian advisors sent encrypted messages of solidarity. Traoré hadn't just survived the attack. He had activated a continental immune system, one that didn't wait for the UN, one that didn't ask for NATO permission, one that said with full clarity, "If you come for us again, we come for you together." The order came at dawn. From Ouagadougou to Bobo Dioulasso, radios crackled with the same command: seal the southern corridor, no exceptions. Within hours, every checkpoint on the Burkina Faso-Ivory Coast border was locked down. No vehicles, no foot traffic, no trade. This wasn't diplomacy. This was a message. Traoré had closed the gate on Abidjan and thrown away the key. At the key crossing in Nyangoloko, armored vehicles lined the roads. AES soldiers, armed with anti-drone rifles and heat sensors, dug in. They weren't waiting to defend, they were preparing to strike. The border towns emptied, schools closed, markets froze. Civilians living within 10 kilometers of the border were evacuated under military escort, trains rerouted, airspace over the southern region became a no-fly zone for all Ivorian aircraft. Burkina Faso was on high alert, but this wasn't panic. This was strategy. AES surveillance drones, now powered by a joint Russian-Iranian AI interface, began scanning the forested borderlands for mercenary clusters and infiltration routes. Within hours, they identified 2 heat signatures moving north, suspected recon teams from Ivorian special forces. They never made it across. AES commandos intercepted both units. Not a single shot fired. "We're not just watching the border," one officer said. "We're listening to its heartbeat." In Abidjan, the response was muted. President Ouattara ordered military reinforcements to the northern garrisons, but his advisors were divided. Some pushed for retaliation. Others warned that any move would trigger an AES-wide military response. The trap was set, and Traoré knew it. Back in Ouagadougou, he stood before his general staff and issued the quiet command that would change everything. Do not provoke, do not panic. Let them make the first move, so the world will finally see who the aggressor really is. But make no mistake, Burkina Faso was no longer playing defense. It was daring the enemy to try. The world couldn't ignore it anymore. A full border shutdown, drone interceptions, confessions on tape, the alliance of AES nations hardening into a regional wall of steel. Now, the ripple effects were reaching far beyond West Africa. In Washington, the State Department issued a carefully worded statement. "We urge restraint and encourage dialogue between our valued partners in the region." But behind closed doors, US military advisors raised the alarm. This isn't just a local crisis, it's a geopolitical chain reaction. Reports warned of potential AES alignment with Russian and Iranian regional goals, shifting the balance of power in West Africa permanently out of NATO's orbit. In Paris, Macron's cabinet panicked. France had already lost Mali, then Burkina Faso, then Niger. Now the Ivory Coast, once their most loyal ally, risked being dragged into a continental war that France couldn't win and couldn't afford to stop. One French general reportedly said, "If Traoré walks into Abidjan, France walks out of Africa." At ECOWAS, chaos reigned. The emergency session held in Abuja collapsed into shouting matches. Nigeria called for de-escalation. Senegal proposed dialogue with military consequences, but Ghana walked out, refusing to condemn Traoré's actions. How many African leaders have to be assassinated before we say enough? The Ghanaian envoy thundered. You call for peace now, but said nothing when coups were planned in the dark. Suddenly, the silence of Africa was breaking. Across the continent, African youth flooded social media. From Stand with Traoré, from Ivory Coast exposed. For no more silent colonies. In universities from Kampala to Windhoek, students held protests in front of French consulates. In the streets of Conakry and Bamako, massive murals of Traoré appeared overnight, painted as a warrior with the caption, "Africa does not beg." And as pressure mounted, South Africa and Algeria both announced plans to send diplomatic observers to the AES headquarters, a symbolic act that shattered decades of regional division. The West was nervous, African dictators were terrified, but the people, they were waking up. And as the old order scrambled to keep control, one voice echoed louder than all the rest. Captain Ibrahim Traoré. "We are not calling for war, but if it comes, we will not run. This time, Africa will not be buried. This time, we bury the lie." The world said, "Show us more." Traoré replied, "Watch this." On a clear Wednesday morning, Burkina Faso's government released a 7-minute video across global media networks. No introduction, no dramatics, just raw, undeniable proof. The footage began with a name, Colonel Vincent Gbahi. The the same Ivorian intelligence official already linked to intercepted communications. The video showed Gabahi in a private meeting, seated with two Western men, faces blurred, inside a luxury villa in Abidjan. Audio-enhanced transcripts rolled across the screen. Phase 2 is greenlit, Gabahi said. After the Kaya event, we have 36 hours to install the interim. One man asked, and the captain himself? Gabahi's reply was ice cold. Traoré won't be alive to see it. The silence that followed on every news station was deafening. But Traoré wasn't finished. Clip 2, a mercenary confession. The same man captured during the midnight raid. Now on camera, clear-eyed and speaking slowly. We were paid through a Dubai channel, half in crypto, half in weapons. The Ivory Coast team coordinated everything. They gave us Traoré's route and promised to airlift us out after the hit. He even named his contact in Abidjan, a senior military attaché to the presidency. Then came the final piece. Clip 3, satellite evidence. AES intelligence zoomed in on a private airstrip 28 km north of Abidjan. Infrared scans showed repeated night cargo drops, matching dates of weapon transfers intercepted on Burkina Faso's side. The aircraft? Registered to a shell company tied to a retired French intelligence officer. At the end of the video, a single sentence appeared on screen. Africa has receipts. Do you? Panic erupted. Western journalists tried, and failed, to dismiss the footage. Ivorian spokespeople went silent. International bodies scrambled for statements, but none arrived, because the truth was now public. This wasn't conspiracy. It was conspiracy caught. And across Africa, millions whispered the same truth. Traoré had now forced the world to see. They were going to kill him. They almost did, but he survived. And now, he's making them regret it. When governments stuttered and empires denied, the streets of Africa roared. From Dakar to Kinshasa, from the favelas of Libreville to the back alleys of Kampala, the people rose, not with weapons, but with truth, chants, and fire in their eyes. In Ouagadougou, over 1 million citizens flooded the capital, young and old, Christians and Muslims, students, vendors, farmers, united beneath one cry, "Touch Traoré and Africa burns." Massive banners hung across buildings. "We choose our leaders, not Paris. Burkina is not alone. No more puppets." In Bamako, artists painted Traoré on school walls, not as a soldier, but as a guardian, holding back the tide of foreign hands reaching for Africa's heart. In Lagos, rappers dropped surprise singles. They tried to kill the captain. Now he's flying the whole fleet. In Johannesburg, students launched Master Justice for AES rallies, demanding their government stand with Traoré against imperial destabilization. Even in Abidjan, whispers began to echo in the shadows. Ouattara betrayed us all. We don't want war with our African brothers. France is using us. It was no longer about borders, no longer about politics. It was about dignity, memory, future. At AES headquarters, messages poured in from across the diaspora. Afro-Colombians in Bogotá marched with AES flags. Pan-Africanists in London organized emergency teach-ins on Western interventionism. In Harlem, a giant street mural read, "They fear a united Africa, so we become it." Captain Ibrahim Traoré watched all of it from a small room beneath the Defense Ministry. No smile, no triumph, just quiet resolve. He turned to his advisor and whispered, "They thought this was about me, but they woke up something far bigger than I ever could." For the first time in decades, the African street wasn't waiting for presidents to act. The street had become the battlefield, and the battlefield had chosen a side.